But then after that, they contacted me again, you know, and asked whether I would be willing to be considered as for election as a Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat. Again, initially I didn't want it. I didn't want it, but I was persuaded by those friends of mine to serve in the national interest. So finally I got persuaded. Okay, fine. That led to my meeting with Tun Mahathir. It's all in the book. Again, I've narrated in quite some detail what happened, and so it is. So it was, I should say. I finally was elected as Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat in a totally unexpected way. So that's why the title is Parliament Unexpected. Two dimensions.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Yeah, at first instance, I was thinking, as I was reading through the book, I was thinking, isn't this is what expected of the Parliament we see today? But of course, when I think about it again, what you would initially expect of the lawmakers of the country would be, you know, sophisticated men and women in the Parliament. But however, yeah, definitely Parliament unexpected. Tan Sri, in the early part of the book, you included a Facebook post which described yourself as, if I may say it true to the Utara dialect, orang baka arang. So, what did you feel when you were called orang baka arang on a Facebook post? And as you have always strived to be the most proverbial common man, do you think coming from humble backgrounds helped you contribute something greater as to your tenure as the Speaker of the Dewan?
I would like to think so. That is why I did not write a memoir. It's also in the book why I did not choose to write a memoir. You know. I personally don't like this kind of self-promotion. If I want to write something, it's not meant to promote me, but to achieve something better. Yeah, so I relished the idea of being called in the Utara dialect orang baka arang because it brought me to my roots. You know, I don't want to be seen as larger than life. There was a reporter I met along the way who said, you know, previously they could not approach the Speaker of the House because the Speaker is seen as larger than life. You know, something which strikes awe, you know, in the minds of reporters and all that. But I wanted to change all that. And I'm glad to be speaking to you all as Democrat. This is what I believe in. You know, I'm a Democrat in the sense of the word. I don't like all this self-promotion and self-aggrandizement. So I go in there to do a job for the Rakyat, as a public service. And that's why I don't feel too bad when I'm removed. Alright? I don't mind, so long as the democratic process is followed. This is also one aspect in the book which I spent quite a bit of time on to show my interaction with the politicians and my demand to them. I will not resign, but if you want to remove me, do it the proper way, do it the constitutional way. And it is there in the book. I said, give me a motion, yeah, now or this afternoon, and I will approve it. Right? No point talking to me about resigning. I wouldn't resign because that's not the proper constitutional way. So that is the setting of the book and my position, yeah? As a citizen, as from humble beginnings, and I would like to remain that way, so that when people read the book, they will know that this is something from an ordinary rakyat, and an ordinary rakyat is telling you a parliamentary story on how we can improve the Parliament of Malaysia together. Again, in the concluding part of the book says we must think through all these problems and change it together. Yeah? So that is the message in the book. It tells a story, but the story is much bigger than me as a speaker. It tells the parliamentary story set in a certain setting to improve our condition, to improve Parliament, to answer the question, what is wrong with our Parliament? Yeah? I have provided the good as well as the bad aspects of Parliament. The good as well as the bad MPs have been mentioned. Some have been singled out by name, most of them not. So don't get the impression that everything was bad during my time. There were good times. There were many MPs who supported me. That's why a huge chunk of the book is also devoted to reforms. Yeah? What we tried to do to improve the Parliament of Malaysia. So there you are. An answer to the question, a bit long, but that is the setting. And I say one other thing. I forgot to say it just now. When I set out to write the book, I was looking at the general reader who can understand the workings of Parliament if it's explained properly. Right? That was what I tried to do. You know, when I was a student, many years ago, I enjoyed reading books like The Consumer and the Law. Well, it is not a thoroughly legal book. It was in the Law in Context series. I think that was done by Professor Harry Street. I enjoyed reading the book because it was anecdotal, it brings you down to the basic consumer level. Yeah, I mean, also, you know, when you talk about Donahue versus Stevenson, the book does not tell you about the law as such. The book tells you about the persons involved, about the snail in the bottle that led to the formulation of a basic principle which we see used today. From very simple beginnings, but I like those kinds of books. There were many others, because Lord Denning wrote some 2 books on due process and all that, all written in very simple English. And again, anecdotal, and explains very simply to the ordinary reader, so that the ordinary reader will understand. If you take the term due process, what is it? Well, yes, everyone confused if you talk in terms of jurisprudence. So I wanted to break that, yeah, and bring something which is simple, so that you can enjoy reading it, and through this process, you will learn a lot about how Parliament works. It's like I wanted to write a book in which I actually invite the reader into the speaker's chambers, and then bring the reader through the processes in very simple terms, so that he or she can appreciate the work being done in Parliament. And at the end of the day, you and I can analyze together and answer the question, what is wrong with our Malaysian Parliament? That's what I want to do. And of course, in the book, I kind of splice it with all kinds of other anecdotes. I even talk about the fish in the pond, you know, to bring it down to a rather basic level, because the fish in the pond is important, you know, to give you the overall setting. I talk about the huge house I was given. I didn't quite like that, you know, being socially by nature, but I didn't like the house. And then I analyzed the condition in Sweden, for example, Norway, yeah, so that you all will appreciate that it is better to be a Democrat, yeah, than something larger than life. It is good for the soul, personally, and also for the soul of the nation. Right? I mean, that is really exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Tan Sri. I think it is really important to ensure that if you are really trying to educate, a certain community, particularly the youth, then it's really important to make sure that you take the right approach. Make sure that they understand what you're trying to tell them. Yes. And thank you, Tan Sri, for ensuring that simplicity in your content. I really enjoyed it. So, still on the book, Tan Sri, you did mention in the book that you were initially reluctant to pen down your recollections of your time. So what then inspired you to write it? Are there any specific events that perhaps made you think, oh, I really need to write this book?
I had written a rather big book, Principles, Practice and Procedure of the Dewan Rakyat in Malaysia. Huge book. I think I brought it with me, maybe later I can show it to you. So that was really hard work. It was a work, it wasn't written by me alone. Prof. Shad also contributed, Prof. Gudia contributed, Ambega contributed, many people contributed, specialists contributors. I wrote maybe about half, or no, 1/3 of it. It's fine. So after finishing that book and editing it, I already spent, it's very hard work. As you know, writing a legal text is very hard work, especially when you have to do it within 1 year. I wanted to do it within 1 year, and I told everyone, let's get it done within 1 year, because the Parliament of Malaysia, shockingly, did not have a book on itself. You know, the last book written was in 1969. Can you read it? And it's about this slim. Yeah, good as a primer of some sort, but not good enough for MPs or administrators to learn about Parliament and to refer to sources to solve problems. And we did all that. Yeah? So after that, I thought, since I knew something was afoot to remove me, so I've done my bit. I've left a legacy in the form of the Malaysian Erskine May. The whole chapter is devoted to the Malaysian Erskine May. But it did cross my mind to write something, because friends were prompting me right from the beginning. Keep your notes, you know, why don't you write something, all right? And even Lotfi was prompting me a few times, keep your notes, make sure you have something later to write something, so it's just later, write something, that sort of suggestion. And then came COVID-19 and the lockdown. It wasn't the first lockdown. First lockdown, I was bogged down writing the big book. Not even the second lockdown, but the third lockdown. I thought, I might as well spend my time usefully. So I sat down and I started writing and writing and writing. So within 7 months, I managed to finish it because it was so fresh in my mind. So, in answer to your question, yeah, I thought I would write something, and since I had the time, I would write it in the way that I wanted it written. I wasn't going to write another, tome, kind of heavy legal stuff. Something lighter as an extension of what I had written in the big book. I'll give you another anecdote. When I launched the big book, to my surprise, it generated quite a fair bit of interest. Not amongst the MPs. I was very disappointed with the lack of interest shown by the MPs. I might as well say, my Pakatan Harapan friends liked the book. Yeah? They purchased the book, sometimes in multiple copies. But not the other side. They didn't seem to be interested in anything with knowledge. Put it this way. So I printed sufficient copies, thinking that all MPs would purchase the book, but not many did. Yeah, because they were simply not interested. I mean, this is again a problem, the cultural problem that I alluded to a number of times in the book, and we must address it, because MPs from whichever divide must be interested. To give you another instance, there was a slimmer book, a manual on the practice procedure of the Dewan Rakyat. Very good manual, slim. I don't know whether you have it in the library yet, but I'll check. Then I'll give you a copy. That was supplied for free. You know, we had one NGO, Office NGO, which assisted us. Everyone wanted the Parliament of Malaysia to improve. We did the book. I wrote a nice forward and all that, and I was a consultant, so we went through, improved the content. But when I tried to get MPs to try to get them to look at the content and provide suggestions for improvement. I just had a handful of them. And the handful are the young MPs. Or still here today. In Parliament. It's like in the book, I have written in glowing terms on the young MPs and the ladies in the House. But I had no response from those in the opposition then. They were simply not interested, except for one, who didn't even come when we did the final editing. So it is a big problem to diffuse knowledge to the lot of MPs. If they're listening, they will be angry with me, but whatever. This is the truth. You know. So I said, since I've written the big book, let me write a version that is directed to the general reader, not so much the MPs, the general reader, the MPs included, those interested. Because, as I was saying just now, there was an editor, one of those who attended the launching said, I found your final chapter in the big book riveting, she said. Why? Because I was analysing the impact of the Sheraton move on Parliament, what actually happened blow by blow, and that led me to conclude that despite upheaval politically, our constitutional structure was sound enough to withstand the constitutional incident of crisis, whichever way you might call it. So you said she found it riveting. So I said, all right, so I will reproduce that part of this in another book. I wish I had done, you know, but not in a legalistic sense, but I've written it as a story. In the final part of the Gathering Storm, I've written about what happened, what led to the Sheraton move, right? I was in Georgia on an official visit. When I came back, I thought things were hunky-dory. Dr. Mahathir and Anwar Ibrahim had superficially settled this issue of succession and timing of succession. So fine. But my optimism, unfortunately, was misplaced. So, but I narrated the sequence, and I would recommend you read that. You borrow, or you don't know to buy that bit. I think it's important for us to realize what actually happened, right? But again, I must say, I cannot claim to have full knowledge on the Sheraton. I was an outsider, but those bits that concern me as Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, no one else can narrate it the way I did. Alright? That's why that had to be written. Why I refused Tun Mahathir's request for a special sitting. People must know what impelled me to refuse the Prime Minister's request. Never done before. Never done before. But I said I must, because I'm bound to protect and defend the Constitution, and therefore, when even the Prime Minister has not got it right, I must refuse, because I'm not going to tolerate or usher in another constitutional crisis. It's all in the book. Of course, others take a different view. I think Tommy Thomas is roundly condemning me for this, and there were others too. But they were not privy, and are still not privy to what actually happened. I cannot give you the full story, because I'm also bound by the duty of confidence. But to the extent that I can disclose, I have disclosed on what actually happened and why I refused Dr. Mahathir's request for that special sitting. Can you imagine? The Agong, the constitutional rulers at that time, were still considering who was likely to command the confidence of the majority of the House. And you expect the Speaker to agree to a special sitting so that the House can vote on the very same question? Cannot be. It would have led to an kind of mini or an offshoot constitutional incident between Parliament and Palace. So I didn't want it. That is the reason, basically, why I refused. But there was also a technical reason. The Speaker cannot simply accept hook, line, sinker, whatever the government tells the Speaker. When you say you need to have a special sitting to consider a matter of national importance, what is it? I don't even have a motion in front of me. How can I approve something that is without content? So that's the technical reason. But the real, overarching reason is to try and avert a constitutional crisis. I think that was a correct decision. Whether others agree or not, it's their opinion. But I did what had to be done. By the book. So that's why I chose to write the book.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for the sharing of the reason why you decided to pen down your experiences as speaker. So now, Tan Sri, let's spice up the discussion a little bit. I think this is what the audience is waiting for. Tan Sri, the office of the speaker is the ethos of a functioning democracy, and I think it is evident in the pre and post of your era, Tan Sri. The person holding the speakership has shown strong biasness towards the government of the day. So how do we ensure that the speakership lives up to its name, one that practices stringent non-partisanship in the proceedings and ultimately honors the principle of merakyatkan parliament, as how you have mentioned in your book?
Yeah. It is all about understanding and acceptance of a proper parliamentary culture. The understanding must relate to the type of political system that we have chosen, political and constitutional system that we have chosen. We have chosen parliamentary democracy. What does it imply? It implies the executive is actually subservient. I shouldn't use the word subservient, I should use the word the executive is accountable to Parliament. Alright? Based on separation of powers, of course, you have co-equal branches. That's why I don't think subservient is the right word, but accountability is the right word. Because without Parliament, there is no government. Parliament is necessary in the process of government formation. That is our system. In our system, government does not spring from the ground, it does not spring from the electorate voting the president. No. It springs from the electorate voting MPs to the Dewan Rakyat, and whoever commands the majority support becomes the Prime Minister. Could be just a clear party leader, or a leader accepted by a coalition of parties, or whatever. So Parliament is integral to government formation in our system. Now, that being the case, the principle of separation of powers, parliamentary democracy, and government accountability all come together to ensure, or should ensure, that everyone must respect each other's place. Alright? So the Speaker of the lower house, especially, not even the upper house, represents Parliament. This is not the theory, this is an accepted provision constitutionally. Therefore, if the Speaker is part of the House, the executive should not control the Speaker. Right? Of course, even the Speaker has got rules, and especially standing orders regulating his conduct and jurisdiction, fine. Right? But he is not and should not be an agent of the executive. This is my point. Right? So it must be made clear that we have this balancing. But the political reality is we have to talk in terms of process. Sometimes law, we talk in terms of mere rules. We have to merge rules with political process. So, but in the political process, all your documents work in a cooperative way. It's not combative. If you have a combative structure, nothing works. So it must work in sync. Right? Government must respect Parliament. Parliament too must respect government. Parliament cannot go head on against the government. No, it doesn't work that way. That's why if you study the standing orders, there is an intricate balance that is maintained in the standing orders. And the Constitution too, the constitutional provisions are also there, right, to maintain this intricate balance. I think Dr. Mahathir finally understood this. That is why I don't think he really condemned me for rejecting, the request. He didn't. Nor in his book he didn't say harsh words against me. Understand? All he said was the speaker wants to be more independent. That's all he said. I don't want to be more independent, actually. I just want to be true to the office. The speaker has to be accorded this degree of respect and independence, so that he can control the House and not be wholly directed by the executive. So to take one example, of course it is wrong for the speaker to speak for a minister. Unheard of in our system. You can't. The speaker must remain neutral. That's also a given. Alright? We have a long history in the Commonwealth, especially in UK. Again, I've cited a quotation from Speaker Sheldon. That is the kernel or the essence of the Speaker's function. Yeah? When the King marched to the Parliament and demanded from the Speaker, to know where those few MPs who had committed treason or sedition against the King were. Speaker Sheldon replied that I've got no mouth to speak, no ears to hear, and no, except as the Parliament directs me. So that is the Speaker's position. The Speaker is not an autocrat. The Speaker speaks for the House. Right? But when the Speaker speaks for the Executive, something is wrong. Something is wrong. Right? And whilst the Speaker must respect the Executive, like giving primacy to government business, there are times when he will have to use his discretion to maintain that balance, that cooperative balance, which is also in the book. I have mentioned towards the end the Sim Sim episode, and how through this cooperation between executive and House, principally between the Speaker and the Minister in charge of Parliament, we managed to persuade 5 or 6 ministers to come to the House within a day to report to the House and to the country on what they had done to avert that crisis in Sungai Sim Sim. I have narrated it so that everyone will understand that the Speaker has a discretion, has a role to play, sometimes to represent the public interest. It's all there in the final chapter, the Sungai Sim Sim episode. They all came. I was so happy. There was a motion of urgency, and Hassan Karim brought that motion. I accepted it the day itself, and then I got in touch with the late Datuk Liu and Anifah Maidin as well, and a few of the ministers. I said, please come, and explain to the entire country. They came. No minister said I will come. No, because I think they understood. It was good for them to come, so that when they came and explained to the whole country, prime time at that, in the whole in the main chamber, everyone was satisfied. They were given kudos for that. Everyone understood that they were doing the best they could. And this is how the system should operate. But what we are seeing today, sadly, belies this delicate equilibrium. Only, was it last month, the month before last, the one minister came to answer in Parliament. Yes, he was not even in charge of the ministry. That's shocking. He came and read from a text, and he couldn't answer supplementary questions. Why would he know? It's not from the ministry. And I don't think the speaker said anything. To me, if I had been there, I would have stopped it. I would have demanded that the speaker, that the minister be present in the House himself to answer it. In fact, there was a ruling that I made in 2019 on this very point. A minister must be present to answer questions from his ministry. If he cannot attend, then the deputy must come. But even that, we were strict. If it's minister's question time, no deputy can answer. Even for the minister. The minister must answer because it is minister's question time. Right? So if the Prime Minister has to answer, the Prime Minister must answer. He cannot ask the Deputy Prime Minister to answer. Right? We were already evolving this to ensure that we have a proper Prime Minister's question time. But all the plans were scuttled by the Sheraton booth. I don't know what's happening now. Sometimes we hear great movements happening, but the great movements have not been translated into great actions as yet. Only yesterday, there was some talk about bringing in the Parliamentary Services Act, the Parliamentary Commission. Three things said. What else? I don't remember now. Whatever it is, those were code of conduct for MPs. All those things we were thinking of doing already, But we have lost time. We have lost about 2 years now. But I hope they do it, and it's just not empty rhetoric. Because that has something to do with the question. How do we get to that point when Parliament becomes a sane place of discourse, proper legislature? These are the things which need to be done. Parliament has to be independent. How do we make Parliament independence? We have to bring back the Parliamentary Services Act, establish a commission, make sure there's financial independence, whatever Parliament requires to be, of course, debated, but government cannot cut down the parliamentary expenditure just like that, And of course, there must be a code of conduct, very, very important, given the current status of our Parliament or the behavior and all that. We must have a proper code of conduct, not only on paper, but with teeth. And the third point that I hear, or read yesterday was, they're going to amend certain provisions in the Houses of Parliament Powers Act 1952. Again, there was something which I was attempting to do. Drafts were already done. Right? So we have a code of conduct. Make sure that code of conduct has teeth. If someone is suspended from the House, make sure the fine has some kind of compelling power, not enough to simply impose 1,000 ringgit fine. They will laugh it off. So 1,000 ringgit, it still stands today. I mean, that was put in 1952. So ridiculous amount. Might as well breach it and then become a hero. You pay 1,000 ringgit. That's it. But there are other things which can be done. I wanted to get agreement on this, because I did one case, so the listeners will know, the Gobind Singh Deo's case, where Gobind was suspended and his allowance was also suspended for the duration of the suspension. I wanted to have it included expressly, but the MPs were looking at it, said, no, we like the decision. But I think something must be done. If you suspend an MP for 1 month or 10 days, and he does not suffer monetarily, it's really, no sanction, empty sanction. So some of them will like it, holiday, an enforced holiday for 2 weeks or something, and they come back again. It has no teeth. I mean, I must be guilty of it too, suspending someone for 2 days. Because of 2 days. He comes back again after 2 days. It creates the same problems to me. The behavior does not change despite that compulsion. I have narrated a few instances in the book. Some of you will find it hilarious, some will find it unbelievable. mean, that's a comment I get. Unbelievable. The fuckery and shouting obscenities or whatever. Right? So, but if you just suspend even the public apology, it doesn't work. We must have sanction. And a code of conduct which makes it very clear, and the code of conduct must bind the speaker too. If you misbehave, if you don't abide by the rules, we have sanctions ready. I hope they do it, you know. Yeah, we'll wait and see. Wait and see. And party hopping too. Another aspect which is very important to improve the performance in Parliament. But having said that, you cannot expect Parliament, any legislature in the world, to be so clinical. Right? There will be moments of boisterousness, you know, name calling, but that is okay, so long it doesn't get toxic. So we can tolerate it. Sometimes there's wit in the boisterousness, whatever. So long as Parliament does its work efficiently and effectively, that's all right. You know, this morning I was just scrolling through the YouTube. Suddenly it pops up, you know, the Australian Senate proceedings. And my God, I was in the Senate of Australia too, and I saw it firsthand. Quite rowdy, quite rowdy. Yeah. But what I saw this morning was more rowdy than what I saw in the Senate. They were going after one another. The minister really proceeding and all that. We don't want that. You know, you can be boisterous, but you must do it with sopan santun, as you say. We don't want you to be so sopan and so santun that it becomes clinical. We don't want that. But decorum we must maintain. All right? So decorum works all across the board. MPs and the speaker too, and deputy speakers. You know, so deputy speaker or speaker cannot simply shout and insult MPs. You can't. That is not the system that we want. So these are cultural factors which I think we must improve. And how do we do it? We have to start, you know, at the top, at the bottom, in the schools and in the universities. We must teach people about integrity, about proper behavior, about decorum. Which is why merayakan Parliament, as we mentioned just now, one of the things I was so pleased to do was to invite students to Parliament, not to any old lecture theatre or whatever, but to invite them to come to Parliament, to be in the chambers of Parliament, and to debate, right? To fine-tune the theoretical skills, so that later on, if they decide to join politics and become ministers or deputy ministers or even administrators, they know what the job entails and how to approach the job in a proper way. Yeah? So there's a long way to go, unfortunately, but the book gives you a flavor of what to expect and what to hope for. Yeah? But I want the reader to read through with a sense of hope. I don't think it's beyond redemption. There are good aspects and bad aspects. I would like to think let's improve on the good aspects of Parliament. That is why I am very strong on the committee system. I want the committee system to take root in Malaysia. Right? Whatever happens on the floor of the main chamber, if it gets boisterous, it gets rowdy, whatever, fine, you can tolerate it up to a point. But the real work must be done in the committees. The accountability of the executive to the Rakyat must come essentially through the committees. And the committees must be improved. You must get people who are qualified, people with integrity, and, well, basically persons who have the Rakyat's interest at heart. And the proceedings must be live streamed. Okay? Because if you don't live stream, the Rakyat don't know what they're doing. Okay? So you must do it. And expand the Kamar Khas that we have now. Kamar Khas, at the moment, it's not Kamar Khas, it's so Khas that it's located in a very small area. Yeah? So if you have a matter of urgent public importance or not, you discuss in Kamar Khas, nobody knows about it. It's not telecast live, it's not live stream. Anyway, the room is so small, you can't expect something of monumental importance to be discussed when only 15 can be fitted in the room. So if you look at this hall, for instance, the space for 15, how small it is. Yeah? On my first day in Kamar Khas, because it was so small, happily I sauntered in and I sat in the registrar's chair. It was so small, I didn't even see the speaker's chair. Yeah? So that has to be improved too. So many things I think requires improvement. So in the book, if you read it, please bear this in mind. I mean, we have hope for improvement and nothing that cannot be done in terms of improvement. There are so many ways of doing it. We don't have to invent the wheel. We have examples to look at from all over the world to see how things are done. Some can be modified to suit our local conditions. Some can be a bit too dramatic for us. For instance, I don't advocate the use of the American-style committee system. Won't work in Malaysia. Yeah. Or even the Indonesian committee system won't work in Malaysia. It's all in the book. I discuss the things that we can do. I strongly favor the Nordic style of accountability through committees, yeah? And of course the British style. But even in Britain it gets a little bit complicated nowadays. Yeah? And a bit too boisterous. Even in UK, yeah? Too boisterous, especially during the Brexit debates. Yeah? I was there, I saw all those things that happened in the British Parliament. But nothing beats the Malaysian Parliament. Yeah? In terms of the level of, I don't know what. Yeah? But we must improve. Yeah? And I hope GE15 more young MPs will enter the doors of Parliament. Yeah? I have not seen young MPs misbehaving to the same extent as the most senior. It's shocking, isn't it? And the ladies are all so well behaved. But they get bullied. Yeah? They get bullied. The episodes are all there in the book too. But there's so many other MPs. I mean, I point blank and say shouldn't be there in the House. Some G15. It's all in the book. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah? It's in the book. Yeah? Because I want to bring out the nasty aspects as well as the nice aspects of our MPs. Yeah? So there. Very long answer to your short question.
So Tan Sri, you did mention about, and you did talk about the Malaysian parliamentary culture. So just briefly, I realized that you did focus on the phrase Malaysian parliamentary culture a lot in your book, and in a rather dissatisfying tone at that. So I'm intrigued to question, what is the Malaysian parliamentary culture? Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it both? Just briefly, because in my personal view, I thought, does this only occur in Malaysia? What I see in parliament proceedings, but I've seen this same behavior taking place in other democracies as well, parliamentary democracies as well. So, thoughts, Tan Sri?
Well, of course, there are certain legislatures, so even worse than Malaysia. All right? Taiwan, they fight on the floor of the house. You've seen the videos, right? Sri Lanka, right? To some extent, even the Indian legislatures in the state level, they get pretty rowdy. In certain African countries, they fight too. Yeah? You know, just to digress a bit. At one time, a few years ago, maybe 4 years back, I'll see that. Maybe, yeah, about 4 years ago. You see, they even attacked the speaker. They threw red chili at the speaker. I happened to meet the speaker later on, the Sri Lankan speaker. So I asked, you were so cool, I said. Now, how do you escape the attack? He said, no, I'm an army man, you know. So I can handle the sort of thing. So very coolly went through the but they even attacked the speaker. Hopefully it won't happen in Malaysia. But the speaker has been called all kinds of names. I have not included in the book because I don't want to embarrass that particular MP. I could have. I said, I better not. You can call me, what kind of speaker is this? They didn't tell it to my face, but he had a media kind of statement issued and attacking me, condemning me in personal terms. What kind of speaker is he? He doesn't know the law. How did he become a judge of the Court of Appeal? You know who I'm talking about, hopefully. So, and the very same person told off my deputy, Kak Komeng. Tidak ada apresiasi in his face. That cannot be tolerated. But I don't know why Kak Komeng took it so coolly. No, he doesn't, you see. But he took it in this way. But this is the kind of behavior that has to change. Works both ways. Likewise, the speaker cannot shout at MPs and say, sit down, do, and treat MPs as small children. You can't. That is not proper decorum, not proper culture. We have to think through this and improve. Everyone knows his place. Have some respect. Either way, MPs should respect the speaker. Speaker should respect the MPs. You may not like their ideas or the style of debating, but respect must be accorded. I have on a few occasions told off MPs, no doubt, but they deserved it. Because as I say, I have great respect for the younger MPs. There was a time when a young MP was speaking, one old-timer, they joked about it. More or less, how do you know, young fellow and all that. So I told him off. And I said, teruskan orang muda. I said it in very loud terms, teruskan orang muda. And there were some old MPs who heard it. It was quite shocked that I said it. So that has to be stated. You can't perlecehkan. People who are young or people of the opposite gender. You can't. You must respect them. You cannot make fun of the ladies because they are ladies. You cannot say because the lady is dark, pergi pakai bedak. I mean, what kind of nonsense is this? There's no respect shown. Or bocho. From the ceiling, bocho, they can somehow in a warped mind equate it to a menstrual cycle. This is crazy. This is something said in Parliament. It shocks the imagination of sane persons. But they continue doing this sort of thing. And that cannot be tolerated. One lady, MP, I think she likes all those bits I included in the book, which she also concerns her. She has bought so many copies of the book. A few days ago, she was ordered additional copies to distribute to her friends, whatever. But I have included it in the book to ensure that this sort of thing hopefully should not happen again. So proper code of conduct with teeth is what we need, education, and put a sense of shame in them. And this can only be done by the NGOs. Give them the sense of shame. I don't know how many of them are reading my book or have read my book. I'm not so sure whether they even bother to read that. But there you are. Parliamentary culture. But if you have enough young persons, then I think we should improve. Many, I can give you a few examples. Batu was the second youngest MP on record. The youngest MP on record is Karam Singh, not the tiger of Jelutong, no, another Karam Singh, much older than Kapal. It's a Kapal Karam. Not one of the two, but from Penang as well. He was the youngest, passed away many years ago. Batu was very well behaved. You have Nasrullah from JB, very well behaved, steady, shock people, condemn people, whatever. Good debater. Kanga, very good, young MP. Kasturi Pato, and I mean the whole lot of them, Ruiza, and so many. There should be more. There should be more. So you all better enter politics and make sure the quota is increased. Or if you don't want enter politics, enter NGOs. And NGOs must play a part. I have not included this aspect in the book, I'm going to say it now. I tried to formulate a system whereby NGOs can connect with MPs through what is called as all-party parliamentary group idea. Something I borrowed from UK. I went to UK and I saw it was a fantastic system. So I brought it back, devised a simple scheme so that anyone who is keen to participate in the parliamentary process can find a home of some sort. All you need to do is to have 5 MPs to formulate, this all-party parliamentary group, join up with MPs, invite NGOs, representatives, and have an all-party parliamentary group to handle certain areas of concern. The most what are called effective multi-party parliamentary group thus far, given the short time that we have, is the Sustainable Development all-party parliamentary group. Very successful. They've been all over the country, right? Try and solve problems. Right? So you can do this. So, but a lot of people, especially people who are of my generation, they complain, they write in WhatsApp, thinking that you write on WhatsApp and Facebook, problem is solved. Problems are not solved through social media. So people must interact. So I hope this idea catches on. And it's good. And they have hit on another avenue, caucuses. MPs can form a caucus and they can address issues. Okay?
Thank you, Tan Sri. So let's move on to the point of parliamentary reforms, Tan Sri. Before that, I'd like to first ask you on what is the idea of merakyatkan parliament? What is it actually?
Back to basics, as I said earlier, Parliament is such an important institution. Right? In 1960, when the real Parliament of Malaysia came into being, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong then described it as the jewel of our parliamentary system. Right? Parliament as a jewel, it's an apex of the parliamentary system. So you got to accord due respect to the Parliament of Malaysia. Yeah? It's not something to admire on top of the hill, in a nice building. You have to accord respect to it. Why do you have to accord respect to it? Because it represents you and I. Where else can the rakyat voice their grievances or control Parliament? Or control, the government, except through Parliament. There has to be a proper, ordering of things. I'm not saying that Parliament is the only avenue. There can be other avenues. NGOs, for instance, can sometimes perform a more useful and effective function. You can. But the proper way to do it is to do it through Parliament, through your elected representatives. Which brings up another point. That is why it's very important to have good representatives in Parliament, to represent you and I. Yeah? And that too must come with teeth. So that if your MP jumps, then he should relinquish his seat. Go back to the people who have elected him. Some people are even talking in terms of recall elections. If the person cannot perform, you have a right to ask him to resign and invite another person to fill the place through a by-election. Yeah, these are systems that we can think through to improve Parliament. But the point is, Parliament is such an important institution that has to be given or accorded the respect that it deserves.
Okay, thank you, Tan Sri. I hope we can grasp the idea of merakyatkan Parliament. So, Tan Sri, let's move on to...
I've not answered fully. So because of that, if I've answered already, because of that, it is very necessary to ensure public access to Parliament. Alright? Which is why in my reform agenda, merakyatkan Malaysia is an important component of parliamentary reform. I could have said, do it by way of forming committees. That's not good enough. Even the committees must be rakyatkan. You must make people aware so that people can come before committees, petition committees to have their grouses heard and satisfied. Not just hearing and not doing anything about it. So you have to merakyatkan Parliament. Parliament must be made open. It cannot be an august assembly with no meaning. I don't like the word august. Yeah? Some people pronounce it as August. Yeah? It's august. Something to fear, to respect unduly. That's not what we want. It has to be a place for the rakyat to come, to have their grouses heard, and the government to be held accountable for all kinds of misuse or abuse of power. So that's why we have to invite everyone. School children must come in. We must have programs for school children. They come in, they sit at the back, they look at how parliamentary proceedings are conducted, or students, university students, or secondary school students must be invited in to learn about Parliament, to participate in Parliament, so that later on they become part of the entire scheme of government. Yeah? Government is not only about government. This point that has to be stated. Government is also about people, about you and I. Yeah? If you say government is for government, that's a dangerous idea. That is why you get misuse and abuse of power. People go in just for the money, make tons of money through politics. We don't want that. We want a system that is devoid of all this. Right? Of course, there's no sin to try and improve your lot. Monetarily, no sin. Yeah? But you have to be held accountable. You must be put in a position where you can perform. I cannot be earning fat salary for nothing. Yeah? So this is the entire concept. That's why I've included in the book. I had to include it in the book. Yeah? This aspect of parliamentary culture or political culture that we must emulate from Scandinavia, or to some extent even UK. Yeah? Nothing wrong with an MP who rides MRT or takes the MRT or rides a bus. You know, they're not being driven, chauffeur-driven in an overly large vehicle. You know, or for the speaker to be supplied with 2 drivers, which was what I was entitled to, so I refused. Yeah, what kind of nonsense is this? Why should I have 2 drivers? Why should the government provide me with 2 drivers? Right? So, this sort of thing. Or traveling first class. Is there any need? You know how much it costs for first class travel? I cut it down. I say, everyone takes business class. It's much cheaper. And for short distances, we fly economy if we can. That's it. Because in Scandinavia, they don't care about such things. It's not important to them. What is important is that the legislature works for the citizen. Right? I don't think the speaker in any of the Scandinavian countries have got a mansion to live in. I don't think so. But there are. Yeah, this particular minister that I met, or the deputy minister of a very important ministry, was walking unescorted, no sirens blaring, nothing. She was walking to take the train home. Yeah? Do you think it will happen in Malaysia? I made the point in the book. Yeah? Do you think it will happen in Malaysia? Obviously, the answer is no. You know? So we must have this. You know, what we have as a natural development. Yeah? Not only sirens are blazing for ministers, but sometimes you get other things too. To hold up traffic or whatever. I don't like this sort of thing, because in my duration as speaker, I think I only used this siren business only twice at most, or once, I can't remember. I don't think it's necessary. If you get caught in a jam, you have to be caught in a jam, like others. So this is what merakyatkan Malaysia, Parliament is like, you know. So you take life like everyone does, right? But of course, if it's such an urgent matter to attend to, and you have to be there on time, then of course there's justification. Yeah? Because it could be a matter of life and death and claim. So you do, but for ordinary occasions, you have to attend a function, you know, at some diplomatic in a place. It doesn't matter whether you're late or not. You know, why do you need to use your siren? Because by everyone else along the road. It's not that. You know, some will dismiss it as remeh-temeh, but to me it is not. Because it speaks of the larger culture. Now, how do we view society? How do we view personalities in politics? Yeah? We don't want to be so feudal that anyone who achieves some semblance of power will have to be kowtowed to. Yeah? Without question. That comes with the hand-kissing. I don't think that's a proper parliamentary culture. Yeah? We have to.
Yeah, that's Sri. If I may backtrack a little, because you mentioned about the Norwegian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, if I'm not mistaken, who, you know, she took the train home with no escorts, no entourage. But here we see a different situation, and I think I'm pretty sure most of us at least have heard of the many incidents where lives are put at risk just for the sake of, you know, giving way to the minister's entourage. So why is there this disparity, Tan Sri, between members of parliament, ministers or deputy ministers, and the normal citizenry of our country?
It is our fault for giving them that sense of greatness. Pardon me for saying so. Yeah? It is our fault. You know, maybe it's got something to do with the feudal background. Yeah? But this can change. Yeah? How can we change it? Back to whatever I've been rambling about earlier, a couple of times. You need young MPs. I think if you're a young MP, yeah, I don't think you'll be too pleased when someone comes to kiss your hand. Correct? No. I think your mindset is different. You'll be more egalitarian. Yeah? Which is what we want. It's not as if in this country there has not been any egalitarian movement. You read your history. There have been, at various stages of our history, numerous egalitarian movements. Right? But lest we forget, don't get overblown by this neo-feudal kind of appreciation of power. This is what it is. We have to change. And politicians must be made to feel that they must respect the rakyat. Don't give lip service only, perform as the rakyat's representatives and respond accordingly. Yeah? Be like the Norwegian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Nothing wrong with it. You think people will respect her less for what she did? I think people will respect her more for what she did. So it has to be. It has to be. So the ministers, this includes even opposition, even MPs sometimes. They go around, they think they're amongst the rakyat and you visit markets or whatever. Yeah? But there's something larger than that immediate issue. Okay? You must really bring yourself down to the level of the rakyat. Right? That's why I like people like Ustaz Fadil Noor in Parliament. The most humble man. You can imagine. No, even Nick Aziz. Tuan Nick Aziz. Very humble. Yeah, this is what we mean by an attitude of rakyat. Something. I can give you one example. The Bar Council paid a visit to Nick Aziz many years back. Right? Of course, I knew him before that because I did all those election petition cases, which I lost all of them. It's all in the book. Those were different days, trying days. But when I brought the delegation to see Nick Aziz, I was with the delegation and I didn't organize it. Someone else organized it. I was with them. They were so surprised to see Nick Aziz coming down the stairs unattended, in his humble sarong, and switching on all the lights by himself. The lights and the fans. Came down, very humble. And they had some bungkus, roti canai. He actually laid it out on the table himself. No entourage, no people shuffling around the extremities to make sure that things are done in order. No expensive Chinaware, nothing. Very simple. So we were all very impressed how people can be so humble. Or father-in-law, he would go to a tandoori and he would be there in the kitchen, scrubbing the pots and pans. He was a leader of a political party, but he did it. This is the stuff that we like to see. Right? So, instead of people behaving sort of, I don't know what the word is, telling everyone off and telling reporters off. That is not humility, that's arrogance. So, we don't want arrogance in politics. That's the last thing we want. We want humility, we want responsive politicians to the needs of the rakyat. After all, you are the representative of the rakyat. It's so plain, but the reality belies plain facts. Yeah.
I agree with you, Tan Sri. Definitely, the government is of the people, for the people, and by the people. Am I right, Tan Sri? So again, moving on to the point of parliamentary reforms, so let's get to that discussion. If you don't mind, Tan Sri, to start off, will you share with us the reforms that you have managed to introduce?
Of course, the committee system, which I mentioned just now, it took some time, because whether it is Pakatan Harapan or Barisan Nasional, or Pakatan Nasional, or Pakatan Nasional, government as a whole don't want to be bothered. Ministers individually don't want to be bothered. It can be quite frightening to some of them to be questioned each time. But it took some time to sway cabinet to acknowledge that we need committees to be established fast. Right? So I managed to do it in a hurry. I established the first 6 parliamentary select committees, and the cabinet agreed with it. But actually, I proceeded to establish them and then table the report to Parliament. It was the second round that it was made a bit more difficult. Cabinet position was it will incur a lot of funds, additional funds. So I told them, no, we don't need to incur additional funds. I'll use the existing establishment. All the officers in Parliament can double up as officers in the committees. Because I saw how it was done again in Norway. You can actually do a great deal of work economically, efficiently, by having small committees. You don't need to have a committee of 20. I don't think it will work if you have a committee of 20. You need to have a committee of 15, that's about it. Very small committees. One research officer will write the reports and do minutes or whatever, and one secretary. And the secretary of the committee can double up for a number of committees. I mean, it's all standard work, nothing very difficult. So we pool resources together. I don't think we ask for a further allocation. So government finally saw the need to have the committees and agreed to establish 10 special select committee. We did it in such a way that all ministries would be covered. And we were at the stage when we were beefing up the powers and the organization of the committees. Until again the Sheraton move came and the new government revamped everything. There was a time when the committees didn't even sit. The pretext used was COVID. Parliament cannot sit, and the committees too cannot sit. Now I cannot understand this. Committees can sit, even though Parliament, the main chamber, cannot sit. Committees can sit throughout. Committees do not depend on when the main chamber sits. It can meet throughout, because they are small. They are committees with delegated functions. And there you are. Now they have re-established the special select committees in a different form. We wait and see, but I am not so satisfied with what's happening now. Some letter issued to attend, and people can simply say, I won't attend because it's just a letter and not a summons, and then nothing is done. And then it dies away. This is not what we mean by a proper committee system. So that was what I wanted to do. Up to a point, we were doing it. We called everyone, who was supposed to appear before the committee. No one actually said, I won't come because I was not summoned. It's issued a simple letter, signed by the Secretary of the House, and they came. Our economists would call and then presented the views of Malaysian economy. And then Professor Jomo and so many others came before the committee to present the views, because the committee wanted to be abreast of economic issues. Many civil servants, senior civil servants also appeared without question to present their views, because I think they respected the special select committees, and the PAC also did a splendid job on, for instance, the vexed question of the level of indebtedness of the country. There was a special select committee on the budget. They produced a report, an impartial report on the indebtedness of the country, right? So you can do all this via the committee system. That's what committee system. The other answer a question within 3 minutes, quite clearly you are waffling. So sometimes the question can be just a yes or no answer, can invite yes or no answer. So you do it that way. Just as you see in the UK House of Commons. Someone sends out, and the minister says the answer to that is yes. He sits down. The fellow gets dumbfounded, doesn't know what to answer next. That is how question time should proceed, because question time is not debating time. Question time is there so that people can ask, MPs can ask to elicit information. Right? Like how many ships have sailed through Port Klang for the last year? So you just give the statistics, and then there will be follow-up questions. Or can ask the minister, what are we to do with all this encroachment in Petinggi Ali in Sarawak? So they can answer within 3 minutes. If they cannot answer in 3 minutes, you can always say, I'll supply the additional details in writing to you. And once that is done, and again I make sure that the answers will be uploaded online so that everyone can read the answers. Yeah, you don't need to read the newspapers every day. It's there in full what the answers are. That's what I mean. And then we beefed up. Before that, I also found that ministers and civil servants were wasting a lot of time just waiting for the questions to be asked. Right? Once we introduced a new system, we could have about 15 questions asked. 15 plus the supplementaries, we could even get to about 40 questions within 1.5 hours, which is pretty good. That's what standard rate, even in mature democracies. The rest can be answered in writing. And then I also said, since ministers and deputy ministers have been wasting a lot of time just waiting, why don't we do it by bunching ministries together? So that if you are from the Ministry of Education, you don't need to come. Alright? If it is not Ministry of Education Day. Previously, they lump everything together. So you'll find the Ministry of Education, Deputy Minister will have to attend every day. And sometimes the question is not asked because there was no time. So we bunch the ministries together so that ministers and deputy ministers need only attend twice a week. That's about it. It's a simple system. I saw it operating in the House of Commons. So immediately when I came back, I said, let's introduce it. And I told Rosmi, the secretary, let's do it. It worked. It worked well. And they were so thankful. Especially the deputy ministers. Otherwise, every day they will be wasting time. It's very simple steps can be taken. Now, then we did another thing with a view to having Prime Minister's question time. The Prime Minister before that didn't even attend Parliament to answer questions. It's sad to say. And throughout the history of Malaysia, there has not been a proper Prime Minister's question time. We seriously wanted to introduce it. But we had to do it in stages. Alright? Because we know Dr. Mahathir is not exactly a young man, so we can't expect him to attend every other time. But we managed to persuade the Prime Minister to come on selected days, come and answer questions as Prime Minister. Although it's not Prime Minister's question time, but in the guise of Minister's question time. Alright? And he came towards the end twice a week or so, maybe once a week, and it worked. So if there was this progression, I think we would have had a Prime Minister's question time very easily. It's not so difficult. We have seen it working in other jurisdictions. Prime Minister comes, so the Prime Minister will come with a huge portfolio, He's got how many officers will assist him. So the folios are there, and you ask a question. Of course, the first question you will have the answers prepared. These are follow-up questions. But if you have the folio, you know where to get the numbers. Yeah, yeah. The Australians are pretty good at this. So is the UK Prime Minister. You can ask him anything under the sun, he will have an answer. You know, because all at their fingertips. But the public would like to see it. The public would like to see the Prime Minister in action, right? And the ministers in action, so that they know they are doing the job and they are accountable. That is what it is about, right? And that we wanted to introduce up to a point. Of course, the other thing was merakyatkan Parliament, as I've spoken earlier on this. But the concept of merakyatkan Parliament has another connotation to it. I wanted to improve the imparting of knowledge about parliamentary affairs in this generic concept of Parliament. So I have opened the doors of Parliament to all and sundry, especially to NGOs and the universities, to come and conduct seminars, talks, workshops within Parliament. Because there is a difference. If you do it in a hotel, even though you invite MPs, the atmosphere is not there. But if you do it within the precincts of Parliament, the aura is different. And I am so happy when I managed to introduce the Speaker's Lecture Series, which was received very well by outsiders. Yeah? They wanted to have more. Yeah? So I invited some good personalities to come. The first one was Raja Zainuddin. He came, ideas man, he came for the inaugural Speaker's Lecture Series. And then I invited the speaker from Singapore to come to talk about Parliament. Yeah? I invited someone from Australian Senate as well. Someone from New Zealand, the Ombudsman of New Zealand, to come. And people were willing to come and listen and imbibe these ideas with a view to reform. Because we cannot be a kata bawa tempurung, and talk about reform, not seeing it in context of how it works. We brought high-class people to come to talk about reform in their respective jurisdictions so that we can learn. And then it came that horrible Sheraton move. And until today, I don't think they have another Speaker's Lecture Series. Sad to say. You know, it's not done, but these are the things that we must do. And again, another part of the reform, I wanted to revamp the research department of Parliament. It's very important. You see the front end and you ignore the back end. The research department is very critical to MPs to perform well. Otherwise, you see what you're seeing now. MPs stand up and they waffle, they talk about general things. We don't want that. We want MPs to stand up, backed by statistics, facts and figures, so that they can question ministers. And when they debate, we want to see that happening too. How can we ensure that this is done? They get full support from the research officers who were underutilized when I assumed the position. So I wanted to beef up that department. I was shocked when they were doing the new wing. So I asked, where are the research officers going to be housed? They say, in the basement, in the old wing. So I said, can we revamp it? Research officers must be near the library. This is where they should be. Yeah, doing research, not only book research, but they have to contact everyone concerned. It's supposed to be interdisciplinary and interdepartment sort of research, real research. Yeah? But it will not be changed because it was already in stone, physically. Because for that, I mean, evidence to that. So I wanted to revamp that. But thankfully, at the moment, this one I have to give credit where credit is due. They have now got a journal called Journal Parliament or something. And that was they're doing slowly. And that's the research department is doing it, which is good. We would like the best is for us to progress along the lines of UK, Australia, US. I sent officers to Canada, to US, to Australia to learn about how they organize their research departments. Yeah? Because it's important, especially the link with committees. Each research officer will be in a committee. They have to write reports, yeah, and supply the needed information to the MPs who sit as committee members. Very important. I hope they will continue beefing up the research department. So this is the reform. There are many things in the reform process. Of course, the other things I've already mentioned. The Parliamentary Services Act, we have already done the bill. Yeah? Amendment to the 1962 Act, we have already done the draft. We were thinking of revamping the standing orders, about to start. We had a consultant from Australia who was about to come and do it, and then the thing happened. Yeah? So I hope they continue.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for sharing with us the reforms that you have managed to introduce and elaborating on why we need these reforms as well. So, Tan Sri, we'd like to focus on particularly the Select Committee. So, as I understand it, a Select Committee is a committee which is tasked to scrutinize the ministerial work according to either specific social issues or specific ministries in general. So, however, this is only what I understand based on my mere surface knowledge, of course, Tan Sri. So, if you would, Tan Sri, could you provide to us, the audience of today, to perhaps give a better clarification on what a select committee is, and a more nuanced explanation of.
Let me put it this way: anything that should be overseen is best overseen by a special select committee. Anything that Parliament has to do. For instance, give you a concrete example. We used to have this committee called Special Select Committee on what is it called? Official public appointments. The idea initially was to have certain public appointments determined by Parliament, or at any rate to be supervised by Parliament in the appointment process. Of course, you cannot get to the most extreme power of Parliament having a say. So we came up with halfway measure. Parliament should be consulted for its opinion. We took a long time trying to get the government to agree on something, and finally they did. The Prime Minister agreed, yes. For certain public appointments, this Special Select Committee should be able to have a say, whether post-appointment or pre-appointment. We got to a stage where even post-appointment, we managed to call up the appointees, and they came to give the committee their views on what they propose to do, the plan of action. This is an important aspect of control. Latifah Koya, for instance, is called before the committee to at least outline what she planned to do. Even, I think, Assazi's, I mentioned that he was in the National Commission, so called, and they all came, they came. So you see, this is one aspect of Special Select Committee. So that people who are qualified will be appointed. If someone is violent to come on a very minor matter. But he had to come and present because it was necessary to solve this very small issue on local government. That's what it is. Yeah? Or if you have a problem with rabies, wild dogs, in certain areas, well, you can call whoever is in charge of a particular area to come before the committee. Anything. Or the committee can also perform as a collector of information and produce reports. They can be done here. For instance, we can talk about, let's say, direction of economic development. There's no reason why a committee cannot be formed to look at this. Yeah? Why is it that we are lagging behind? They can summon all necessary expertise and produce a report. Or raise elections. Yeah? Committees can do it. In fact, they can do it better. In the UK, for instance, there was a committee or a committee. They did a good report on Islamophobia, for instance. Yeah? With facts and figures. Yeah. That's all. Have I answered the question on what committees should do or can do? That's it, anything. Yeah. Provided you arm the committees with power and with proper definition of functions, so that everyone knows what's expected of them. And I already prepared kind of the guidelines for committee chairman. It's all done. Our consultant, this is the big book back, guidelines for committee chairs. It's all done. These are not very difficult things to do, but goodwill was in there, and people must resolve to do. Otherwise, they can't compete.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for explaining to the audience on what a select committee is. I hope we have a clearer picture on what a select committee is, so we can delve into the discussion on select committee. Tan Sri, as I am aware, there were only 6 agreed on select committees, and these are, if I may list them out, the Budget Committee, the Committee on Major Public Appointment Committee, the Consideration of Bills Committee, the Defence and Home Affairs Committee, the Gender Equality and Family Development Committee, and the State and Federal Relations Committee. So my question is, Tan Sri, why were the 6 select committees chosen above the others?
In terms of priority, actually, at the end of the day, in terms of priority, the needs of the day, major public appointments, because of the things that we saw prior to Pakatan Harapan administration, there was a need to have some control over major public appointments. So we established it to ensure there's public confidence in public appointments. Of course, that's done away with now. Yeah? We don't have it under the new administration. There's federal-state relations. We thought it was important to establish it. Of course, not really in terms of Sabah-Sarawak affairs. Something more generic, something more all-embracing, to include all states. Yeah? Because we know certain states are having problems with federal government. We want to be fair to everyone. Let's have a federal-state relations committee. Yeah? Consideration of Bills Committee also regarded as something very important, because we didn't like the way the legislative agenda was done previously. Bills come very late, and because the government had the necessary votes, they get passed. You know, without much ado. We wanted something better than that. We wanted bills to be at least tendered early, so that committees can be referred to. Committees can then look at the bills, deliberate on the bills, and it goes back to Parliament to go through the normal legislative agenda. That's why we had the Consideration of Bills Committee. It worked up to a point because we finally got the IPCMC bill to be referred to this committee. And the committee went round the country to get views. and publish a report. But again, nothing came of it because of the changes. You know? But the point is, this is how things should be done. I'm not, present people might be critical of me when I say what they're doing now is not quite right. Even in terms of the proposed anti-hopping law. I'm on record as telling the fact that it shouldn't be done this way. The minister cannot be chairman of the committee. You know, if it's a parliamentary select committee, he can't be chairman of the parliamentary select committee. Right? He can be the minister who moves the bill and then have a motion to refer it to committee. But that parliamentary select committee must be headed by someone who's not a minister. But they say, no, I got it wrong and I have no experience, whatever. But short of telling whoever, saying, look, we did it for IPCMC bill. That's a proper way to do it. Yeah. So it's important to have consideration of bills committee. Every other organization will have it. Yeah? You don't need to refer every bill to the consideration of bills committee. Yeah? Only important bills. All right. Now, if you want to abolish the death penalty, for instance, it's good to refer it to a special select committee. All right. Or maybe they want to have a look at amendment to the Drugs Act, whatever, to take into account cannabis or whatever. It has to be studied properly. And how do you get proper study done? Not on the floor of the main house. Nothing gets done there in great detail. It gets sidetracked. Yeah? So you have to refer such matters to a proper select committee. Because the select committee, back to the question you posed earlier, the select committee can then call the experts, listen to them, and then formulate reports, send it to the main house to deliberate finally. Yeah? That's how things should be done. Yeah? But change will take time. The rest is the same. You mentioned what? Defense and foreign trade. Home affairs, yeah. Yeah, that's important. In the normal run of things, we have to have it. Take into account human rights issues, and so on. But after that, I was not very happy with it. I thought we needed something more, especially after ISET and the Rome Treaty debacle. I said we must have one other special select committee to handle international affairs. Trade and international affairs, very important. And towards the end of my term, it was actually the most popular special select committee. The chairman was inundated with work. You know, lots of people wanted to see him and talk about trade and international relations because we have the committee. Yeah? And of course, there are spin-offs, you know, when you can have engagement with foreigners who come, right? And they feel very happy with the system. They get heard. Yeah? They feel that they have an avenue to voice their concerns about the economy of the country and how we should move and how we should improve. And the work can only be done through committees.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for the elaborate explanation on why these 6 committees were selected above others. Tan Sri, I think you mentioned earlier about the SKME. Yeah, so perhaps you could give us a brief explanation on what the SKME is, and also your efforts to create the Malaysian SKME, law and principle in the Dewan Rakyat, came to fruition during your efforts as a speaker. And so, are there any features specific to Malaysia, not within the original SKME?
Yeah, many things. You see, SKME is now about maybe 200 years old. From a slim volume, it's grown to quite a fair size. They have shrunk it a bit. It's now accessible online, proper search engine. In UK, if you have a particular problem on procedure or practice, you just look up SKME, and SKME will give you the answer. But because the UK system has advanced so much we need to have a local version. When even the procedures have changed. Right? It gets very intricate in the UK. So when I was in Australia, I saw this Australian called House of Representatives practice, which I thought was much better than this book. So that was the book we started, although it's called National Scheme Made It. But the model is actually the Australian House of Representatives practice. Simpler, more to the point, with a lot of examples. A scheme made doesn't have this. A scheme made very wordy. Right? The Australian version is more to the point and simple. Right? They have a big problem or something. Someone drinks an alcohol in the house. What do you do? Right? Let someone do non-mental. You can look at the book. You give you instances. What the reaction was, what Speaker's decision was on the question. So I wanted to have something like that, and we produced the Malaysian scheme, so-called, which will include all the necessary knowledge that people will need to know as a reference point. Right? For instance, there is a segment there on rulings of the Speaker. It's not complete now. It's still work in action. But there are sufficient rulings in there for any speaker or any MP to know what is meant by misleading the House. And before that, there was nothing. No one cared to compile anything. But there are so many concrete examples of what is meant by misleading the House. For instance, if a minister stands up, says something which turns out to be incorrect, because he's been ignorant of it, that is not misleading the House. Okay? There must be an element of what you call an intention to mislead the House. But you know, each time there's some error or misleading the House, and maybe 10 minutes or even more, it will be on that point, misleading the House, coming to forget them. Okay? So, if you have a book like that, people should know what is misleading the House and what is committing an error in imparting some information. If it is a mere error of information, then the Speaker can of course ask the Minister to come the next day, correct that error, which I have done. It is also in the book, so that people will know what to do. You know, you can actually ask the Minister to come, or Deputy Minister, to state on record, this is a correct position. I mean, human error will be there. So you need to correct it. Because otherwise it stands as part of the record in the handset for years and years and years, and that's not good. Anything. If you have a problem or anything, you look it up. And it is also good for first-timers to learn about the legislative process. I've included in there purposely, although it's not in the Australian nor in the Scheme version, but in our version, I've included charts. So that people will know the legislative processes. Nothing very intricate. What are motions? We explain what are motions. How do you take through a motion to its end? What is the legislative process in passing of bills? Non-money bills and money bills. So what is involved? Or constitutional amendments. What is the process? The charts are all there. So like anyone reading it, the first time MP or even an old MP, possibly forgotten, who never seen it, learn the process, will know the sequence. Yeah? Certain things have not been done. It's referring a matter to special select committee. At what stage? You can get very intricate. So if you have a book, what to do. As they did early, a few months ago when it was presenting the anti-doping bill, you can have a draft, and then at first reading you read it, and then you explain it in the book. First reading is actually not a debate, it's just reading. It's just like that, it just ends up, reads for the first time, that's it, no debate. Second reading, that's where the big thing comes. Stands up again, explains the bill, right? And then the vote is taken at second reading after a prolonged period of debating, for instance. And if it's a constitutional amendment, then it is explained again. What is the majority needed, and what stages it is needed. You know, first reading you don't need because of mere reading. Second reading you need to have two-thirds majority. That's not enough. Third reading too, you need the two-thirds majority. Then in between you have your committee stage. Committee of the whole house. Many people don't understand what is committee of the whole house. What is the procedure? I had a delegation from a school, and there were teachers there. They told me, finally we understand what committee of the whole house means, or committee stage. They thought committee stage means they go to another room to debate. No, it's not like that. It sounds mysterious, but there's nothing to it. There's all these archaic practices. When the House adjourns into committee, what they do is, you call the sergeant at arms, who trots over to the chokma, he leaves the chokma, puts it down, and declares, people declare committee is in session. That's it. And the speaker is known as chairman of the committee. That's it, the speaker. For that stage, nothing in briefing, but it needs to explain to MPs as well as to the general reader. So, because it's useful in that sense. But of course, there's a lot of legal stuff too in the SC made. There are chapters on the role of the courts, parliamentary rights and privileges, it's all that everyone to read. But I won't recommend that, we did it many times. I would recommend it to the ordinary reader. To the ordinary reader, I would recommend this small book. It actually contains a lot of the information which I've included in the big book. But in a more, discussive way, with a lot of anecdotes. You can see it there. For instance, parliamentary, constitutional amendment. I've devoted one whole chapter on it, on the amendment of the and constitutional amendment. But if you read through the chapter carefully, the process is spelled out. The same as I spelled out in the big book. It's not like it's more legalistic there. Here is more anecdotal, but the process is also with a lot more spice. Included the header, excerpt from the answer, and kinamatangan saying, walaupun topan melanda, saya akan sokong. So it's interesting. The flavor of the parliamentary proceeding. You will get it in the big book. So that's key.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for sharing with us what the SDMA is. So we are almost coming to an end. So let's end it with a more heated up question. Again, I hope that was an insightful discussion on parliamentary culture and as well as the reforms that has to be done, as well as what has been done. I also hope that it was not too technical of a discussion. And so, Tan Sri, to get back to the more heated question, this is a rather controversial and perhaps quite personal as well. So if you don't mind me asking, Tan Sri, you have mentioned in your book that you did meet with the then Prime Minister, Muhyiddin Yassin, that inquired for your amicability to further hold the Speaker's office, in which he reiterated that you have and will discharge your functions as the Speaker with impartiality and non-partisanship. And if I may say this, the government at that time, as I think we know, particularly the Prime Minister, were in fear of a vote of no confidence. So the question now is that why did you choose to take an honourable stance when you could have just cooperated with the government of the day and stay as the Speaker to this day? And perhaps maybe you could also share on the experience of getting ousted, as you have mentioned in the book.
When I took that position, when I agreed to be elected as Speaker, I did say earlier that I wanted to do a public service. Right? I wanted to introduce reforms. Those reforms, I felt, had to be introduced and strengthened so that whoever comes to power will have to abide by these new rules and practices from that reform process. Whoever, so that we have stability in the system. So when the Sheraton move, or Langkah Sheraton happened, of course, I was disappointed. So a lot of my Pakatan Harapan friends, because the work had not been done fully. You know, I had my reform agenda, which I had already started. It was moving very well, and then this thing happened. So at one stage, I thought maybe it will be very difficult for me, to continue as speaker. I didn't mind not being a speaker. Yeah. But then many of my friends called me up and said, "Don't, you should continue being a speaker, get the reform agenda done, yeah, and then at an appropriate time, we can leave whatever." As I was saying just now, I wanted to introduce the code of conduct, to revamp the standing orders, and all that, which I suppose I would have dropped. I had to drop if I had decided to resign. I wanted to maintain that independence. Yeah? So I did tell the Prime Minister that I have been independent, and I don't think I have been partial to anyone. In fact, the first MP that I suspended was not from Barisan Nasional. It's not from the opposition then. I suspended Ram Kapal, the EP. It was the first person I suspended. Yeah? A lot of people were shocked. It never happened before. The Speaker suspending a member of the government backbench. Yeah? And there were others, Kota Melaka, for instance. I suspended him too, government backbencher. Yeah? I didn't suspend many actually, for that matter, from the government from the opposition bench. So I said, yeah, I will continue. I said, why should I leave? I've got a job to do. I better continue. So if they want to remove me, they have to follow constitutional process. That was my point of view. But if the constitutional process is followed, and I don't get the votes to have me detained, so it's okay by me. I can always go back to practice, which is where I am now, back in practice. I suppose there's some advantage in being a lawyer, because you can always go back to the firm and do some kind of work. So that you are not beholden to politicians. There's a certain kind of independence and democratic feeling about it. You're not beholden to anyone, so you can always go back. If you succeed, you succeed. You don't succeed, you don't succeed. That's legal practice. But you have that sense of independence. Hence, that's the answer to your question. Have I answered it? Controversial, what? But of course, I cannot tell you what I say to him, what he said to me, and all that. But that's said in confidence, it will be very gossipy, that if I do that. A lot of other stuff. But I won't say that. So there you are. But I think they were too scared of me in case I get too independent. But I assured them that if motions are properly filed, I have no choice except to accept. But then there are other rules that I, as Speaker, would have to follow, like government business, or state presidents, and that sort of thing. I think they were too, I suppose, concerned in case I get too terribly independent. After all, here is a Speaker who can even refuse a Prime Minister's request for a special sitting. And now here he is, accepting motions from that very person he has refused a motion for special sitting. I think that was a tipping point. I thought I had no choice. If it's in proper order, I cannot say it's not in proper order. It's there, I accept. If it's not in proper order, I will reject. I even rejected a motion for the House to vote to retain me until the next general election. I said that's not proper. It's not under the standing orders. So I rejected that one. Yeah? So anyway, I told her I'll go by the book. So you can do whatever you want, but I go by the book. They want to remove me, go by the book. So that's it. I mean, that's a very colorful side to the parliamentary story is there. Yeah? A meeting with Azmin and Takiuddin. So that's the correct version. So there. Controversial, but some people thrive on controversy. No.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for being willing to share this controversial question. So, well, in the interest of time, as we come to the conclusion of today's event, do you have any final words, Tan Sri? Perhaps your hopes and dreams for further parliamentary reforms in the future, as well as for the Malaysian youth, perhaps?
Yeah. As I said at the beginning, I write the book with certain purpose in mind. Yeah? And the book takes you on a progression. In the pandemic, right? So I think I must broaden it. In the course of doing research for that inaugural lecture, I found that there was a dearth of authority worldwide on what was the reaction of countries in the Spanish flu epidemic. It was 100 years ago. Very few. In fact, in Malaysia, almost nil. I found one about someone coming to Malaya to work in an estate, but there's some small mention about the Spanish flu pandemic. Yeah? Aside from that, nothing. So I thought I might as well document this. Who knows, in 50 years or 100 years time to come, and when if we have another, God forbid, pandemic of a great proportion, then people will be able to have some resource material. This is what they did at that time. Yeah? And of course, this is a continuing problem. I spent some time elaborating on our responses and the responses of other legislatures in the Commonwealth and what we tried to do from the very early days. And people who didn't understand what Zoom was and Microsoft Teams or whatever and all the platform, they didn't understand how to operate it well. These were early days. But I believe that this could be done. So I experimented with it. So I thought I'd better document it. Yeah? So that now, of course, it's taken for granted. School children use the platform, everyone uses the platform, except Parliament. Until today, there are no rules to govern teleconferencing. Shocking. I wanted to introduce it actually, but there you are. Shocking. But that has to be done, documented. So the fourth part, which to me is a very important part. If you have the book, I hope you will read it. That's actually written jointly with myself and Olfi. Spent some time doing it and improving on it. The chapter we call In Closing. It is not an epilogue. It is not a concluding chapter, but something that is continuing. That is why we call it in closing. A story that is yet to be unfolding. Yeah? And in that chapter, I speak about hope, I speak about problems, I speak about what needs to be done, yeah? And what we can do together, as I said. Yeah? And I speak of expanding the middle ground, right? Strengthening the middle ground, so that we can improve further, and end on that note with hope that we can improve our condition, political condition. Yeah? And it is not impossible for us to progress further, so long as the extreme elements in society, very clearly in the book, are deserving of the place they deserve. Yeah? It mustn't take center stage. They have to be at the extremities. That's the only way to go. Expand. Get sane people on board. Get people with integrity. And all those things are very important. We have to think through this together. That is a final message in the book. It tells the parliamentary story. It tells the story of our political process with hope at the end. Hope amidst despair. Let me put it that way. Not entirely hopeful outlook, but despair and hope and what we can do. Yeah? And of course, when you read the book, I hope people will understand the parliamentary process better. I've got responses from many, including seasoned political commentators, who said, well, one said, oh, I never realized how intricate it will get in Parliament. Thank you for writing the book, because now this person can understand what's happening in Parliament, really. Yeah? So, if it has that effect, then I'll be very glad that I have not spent wasteful time writing the book. And to students, I think it will help you, if you're a student of constitutional law or political science, whatever, to appreciate real politics. Politics in action. So I have explained it very vividly in simple terms. So as someone said, it's like me inviting the reader into my office and following me on my journey to do this, to do that. And, so these are my final words. No, not final words, because young. Yeah. So again, I wish to say, I hope to see more young faces in Parliament. Yeah. This is the time. People who are 40, 50s, just right to be top leaders. Yeah. After all, when we achieve independence, aside from the Dewan Rakyat, who was already 50-ish at that time, the rest were very young. Yeah? Tun Dr. Ismail was very young, fresh out from medical school, after about 3 years of practice. Joined politics, became a senior minister, and acting prime minister. All very young. Very young. So there is no reason why history cannot repeat itself. You know. So let's see more young faces. This is the worldwide trend. Finland, New Zealand, yeah, Australia now. I don't know how many ministers, but look at the independent movement in Australia. Very young, right? The Nordic countries, for instance, very young. Even UK, for that matter. They're very young ministers. So, about time we have young ministers and maybe even lady prime minister. After all, don't forget, we had the lady deputy prime minister. Don't forget that. No, yes, we forget.
Thank you, Tan Sri. I share the same hopes and dreams as well. And inshallah, let's see and hope that these dreams will materialize in the nearest future. Thank you so much, Tan Sri, for your time and effort spent on answering these burning questions from me. We will have a Q&A session later, soon. So I hope everyone here enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. And I also hope everyone managed to grasp the idea of how the Malaysian political landscape is currently. And I hope that everyone here has learned a thing or two from this discussion, valuable for future purposes. And with that, I will pass the mic to the MC.
Hello. Alright. That's mine. Okay. Thank you so much, Tan Sri, for your perspective on the current Malaysian political landscape, and thank you to our own comrade, Ms. Balkis, for moderating the book discussion. We will now proceed to the Q&A session for today. For your information, this Q&A session will take around 15 minutes and is open to all participants of the event. Therefore, we welcome any questions from the floor. You may raise your hand and a representative will usher you to the microphone for you to ask your question verbally. Alternatively, you may scan the QR code presented on the screen to type your questions out, and our representative will select your questions and read them out loud for you. With that, I pass the floor again to Comrade Balkis.
Thank you, Comrade Selina. We shall begin the Q&A session. If anyone wants to go.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good evening to everyone here. My name is Muhammad Faris Rashad, political science student U2 from UKM, also representative from Demokrat UKM. So throughout the whole session, saya faham yang Tan Sri ada menyatakan hasrat untuk menyaksikan lebih banyak MP muda Parlimen. Jadi bila bercakap tentang politik, kita faham bahawa politik ni meliputi segala benda, daripada makanan, ekonomi dan juga kehidupan secara general. Tapi selepas berlakunya langkah Sheraton serta pandemik sekarang ni, kita nampak tak ada pembuktian yang nyata, tapi kita nampak secara anekdotalnya anak muda sekarang semakin, saya boleh katakan, disillusion dengan politik, because coupled with how complicated, complex and daunting our parliamentary and democratic system is, ramai yang merasakan bahawa tak ada harapan dalam politik itu sendiri. Okay, politik kepartian lah setidaknya. Jadi sebagai seseorang yang pernah terlibat secara langsung dalam tahap politik tertinggi negara, iaitu Parlimen sendiri, pada pendapat Tan Sri, bagaimana kita nak mengelakkan masyarakat daripada disillusion in the process of participating in our democratic process? Okay, terima kasih.
Ya. Ini soalan yang kerap kali kita dengar sekarang. Seolah apabila diulang-ulang, kita menerima tanpa menyoalkan kebenarannya. Ya? Memang ada sedikit sebanyak tu disillusion, ya? Feeling of disillusion. Tapi kalau kita kaji betul-betul, ya, berapa ramai yang sebenarnya yang berpendapat sedemikian? Saya tak tahu berapa orang tak. Tapi apabila saya berbincang dengan anak-anak muda yang lain, ya, golongan yang lain, ada juga golongan yang memang hendak berkecimpung dalam politik, ya, supaya dapat mengubah keadaan. Ya. So we mustn't feel disillusion. Ya. Masalahnya kerap kali social media buat kacau. Ya. Kita terima seolah apa yang disebut oleh social media itu sebagai betul, sebagai hakikat. Ya. Terutama social media oleh influencer yang berada di luar negeri. Ya. Seolah apa yang disuarakan itu memang boleh dipercayai. Kalau disebut bahawa Pakatan Harapan itu memang hancing, kencing dan sebagainya, kita terima bulat-bulat. Pernahkah kita kaji semula betul atau tidak? Adakah benar bahawa Pakatan Harapan tidak memberi harapan langsung dan tidak menunaikan janji-janji mereka? Kita kena kaji betul-betul, gunakan sikap adil. Sebab dia banyak spin sekarang di social media. Malang sekali influence social media itu kuat sekali. Jadi apabila orang membaca, dia terpengaruh dengan social media, dengan komentar-komentar di social media. Sekarang TikTok macam-macam jenis orang yang memberi komen. Kadang-kadang tak boleh diterima langsung. Jadi if we fight that urge to believe that there's no more hope, I think we can move forward. Anak-anak muda yang berkecimpung dalam muda misalnya, I don't think they lose hope. So we have to do it lah. Macam saya sebut tadi, expand the middle ground. Ruang pertengahan itu kita harus dikembangkan, kita harus dikuatkan. Itu ruang pertengahan ini yang akan menerjui perubahan dalam negara ini. So don't be too disheartened. It is therefore very important to avoid this continuing negatively. Very important to have the anti-hopping law. Bukan semua give up sebab ni lah. Hopping ni. This is a scourge. Sebab itu bila orang sekarang menyebut tentang buat apa nak undi sekali lagi, kita undi pun senang-senang dia orang lompat. Duit boleh beli segala-gala. Bawa orang ke mahkamah pun tengok apa jadi, macam-macam lah. But we must resist all that and rise again. Saya sebut beberapa minggu dulu, we must rise again, and we can rise again. Forget about the negative vibes. Get our good vibes moving, and the young this time must lead the way. I have full confidence the young will lead the way. Saya tengok perkembangan di Johor misalnya. I am comforted with this movement. There is hope. Of course, if you talk to the older ones, especially the established politicians, they will say, mentah ni, they don't know. Don't be disillusioned. Saya pun disillusioned kadang-kadang bila berbincang dengan orang sebaya saya. What's the point? Kita pergi mesyuarat pun, what's the point? Jadi aktivis pun, what's the point? Kalah juga, menang pun boleh kalah. But we owe it to ourselves and to the progress of the nation to continue fighting. And please turn up during general election and vote. Janganlah jadi macam Johor, 50% saja yang hadir. That is very bad. But because of the disillusion, we must turn out in full force, especially the young. Kalau tidak, undi 18 sia-sia. Berapa susah kita buat tu. Tiba-tiba kita dapati anak-anak muda tidak hadir untuk mengundi. Tragedi yang besar.
Thank you, Tan Sri. I hope that answers your question. So we also have a few questions from the audience which they have submitted to this Google form. So this is a question from Melvin. So the UK Parliament has an average 100 to 120 days parliamentary proceedings every year, whereas Malaysia has only around 50 to 60 days per year. It caused delays for new bills to be tabled and passed in Parliament and created some problems in the judiciary as some of the laws are outdated. Do you think we need to increase the number of parliamentary proceedings?
Yeah, I fully agree with it. I think people need to work harder in Parliament of Malaysia. Because if you have a normal job, you don't work for 50 days, do you? in a year. But the excuse often given is, but we need to go back to our constituencies. We can work around the system. Uzbekistan was a splendid system. They say in Parliament for one full week, right? And then next week they go back to their constituencies. The week after they come back to Parliament. So they do a lot more work than we do here. The Uzbekistan, other countries have given up the idea of working 50 days a year. Australia, they work very hard. All the MPs work very hard. And of course, in Australia, people will say, "Wow, but their government officers are just next door." Right? So the minister can just run to the chamber each time there is a debate involving him. But these are technical issues. If there is a debate concerning a certain ministry and minister should be on standby, we've got beautiful rooms in the house here. We've even expanded the house. There's an annex, big annex. They can stay there. Or MPs are given rooms there. Yeah? So all these excuses are rather lame excuses. And the style of politicking will have to change. You can't be at the constituency every other day of the year to attend kenduri, funeral, cut ribbons and whatever. Some of the functions can be done by the activists. Just delegate. But your job as MP must be there in Parliament to hold government accountable, to work in committees and so on and so forth. So you should work more than 50 days in a year. 100 days in a year to start with is good. This is what we were thinking of earlier. In the Buku Harapan, going about 100 odd days in a year. Yeah? And that is a good figure. In fact, we can do more. Gone are the days when people can even sit for half a day. But olden days in Parliament, in the 60s, they would sit in the afternoon only and let's go shop. Because the legislative agenda was so brief. Nowadays, we have all kinds of bills to be passed in a year. And the financial bills themselves are massive. So you can't have a budget session lasting for just a few weeks and hoping that everything will be wrapped up very nicely. Yeah? You can't. Right? So that's why if you have so few days, they jockey up for time. There's never enough time for people to debate a particular issue. And then everyone will gamble. I've only got 5 minutes. They've only got 5 minutes because they're only 50 days in a year you work. So expand it to 100 days. Is it going to overburden them? I don't think so. I don't think so. Provided, of course, they're given the support in terms of manpower, proper officers. All the parliaments I've been to don't work 50 days in a year. Tell you that. Norway, even Kuwait, for that matter, work more days in a year than our MPs do. Indonesia, many more days compared to us. I think we should change. Sorry, I agree with you. Oh, this is from the internet. Whoever it is.
Okay, thank you, Tan Sri. So next we'll invite anyone who would like to.
My name is Christian. I'm a first year economics student. So I have 2 questions to ask you. Number 1 would be, what constitutes a loss of confidence in the government? Because during the Sheraton move and even after that during Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin's government, you can see SPs being signed on both sides. You see a call for a vote of no confidence. You see the king playing his part in actually taking MPs and listening to what they have, their opinions. And after 2 days, you see them announcing that, oh, they lost confidence and all of that. And you also see the similar interactions in state legislative assemblies, Sabah, Melaka, and even now in Melaka it's quite shaky. So where do we actually say that we have a loss of confidence and there should be a vote of no confidence, or how does it play? Because the Constitution doesn't actually provide a remedy for this. It's only 43 sub-clause 4. It says if you lose confidence, you can either dissolve the assembly or you put a new prime minister. That's question number one. Question number two is on emergency powers, Article 150. So Parliament was brought up for a period of around 8 months, and that's brought by the Emergency Ordinance, Section 14. So do you think there should be restriction placed in Article 150 sub-clause 6 of the Federal Constitution to stop any Prime Minister from actually suspending or proroguing Parliament for a longer period of time? That's the questions.
Yeah. Two very good questions. To your first question on how do we express a vote of no confidence, it could equally be a vote of confidence too. Yeah. Of course, following from the decision in the Perak case, Datuk Nizam Maluddin, it gets very murky. Yeah? And it creates its own problems. Yeah? I think it's a bad decision. Of course, it remains a decision. A proper position to take is a vote of confidence or no confidence must be carried on the floor of the House. Because otherwise it's so much in a state of flux. Yeah? But of course sometimes you cannot have it immediately, but that's fine. Yeah? Then you can have an interim Prime Minister or whatever. Then the sovereign will have a part to play. There's a reserve power of some kind there. But ultimately to test it properly, it cannot be done by statutory declarations. You know, people can swear a number of statutory declarations at any one time, and they change their mind too, you know. So the best is to have it expressed on the floor of the House. So to do that, of course there will have to be legislative changes now because of the Nizam within decision. But you can also do it by tweaking the standing orders, I think, yeah, to make sure that whenever there is a vote, a motion of confidence or no confidence filed with the Speaker, government must provide time to vote it, which is not happening now because the standing orders are silent. I think that needs to be done also, I think, as a matter of urgency. Government must provide time. Even if someone is appointed by the King as Prime Minister, allegedly for having majority support, he must put it to the test on the floor of the House as soon as possible. Yeah? And when a motion is put, time must be given. Yeah? If not immediately, then within a reasonable time, which is a position in Australia, UK, whatever. Yeah, that has to be done. Yeah? Your second question is on emergency powers. Yeah, also a good question. Whatever was done under the several emergency ordinances, but of course that main emergency ordinance, Section 4 or Section 14, is the main one. Parliament should not have been suspended. I mean, this is a comment I made in the book. I say it's wrong. Despite the pandemic, other parliaments in the Commonwealth function, yeah, with necessary changes to their processes or rules. Yeah. We could have functioned. We could have functioned via teleconferencing too, yeah, or limited participation of members on the floor, on a rotating sort of schedule. Many things could have been done. It was, to my mind, too drastic to suspend Parliament. But of course, that was after my time. Yeah? So, again, we need constitutional changes done, yeah, or some favourable rulings from the courts of law. And we're seeing some, movements here. Yeah? People are challenging whether the basic structure doctrine should apply.
But there's the outskirt clause.
Yes, that is being challenged as we speak. Yeah? As we speak, it's being challenged. There is an appeal now. Leave has been granted. Yeah? So it will be ventilated because we can't say which way it's going. Yeah? But best of all, we can effect some legislative changes. And a clear statement from the courts is good enough. You want to declare emergency, fine. But that emergency declaration and ordinances must be tabled on the floor of the House. We took a case in court. Of course, we didn't succeed. Leave was not even granted. Yeah? But now leave has been granted by the federal court to argue this very same point. Measure of last resort. Pandemic is not a measure of last resort because others have not used this power to suspend their parliaments. They have used emergency powers, but these are administrative emergency powers. They have not suspended their legislatures. So we did it, of course, we did it in style, not only Parliament, but all the legislative assemblies were also suspended. Yeah? Everything was suspended. But now, even now, I think 2 emergency proclamations have not been tabled before the House. The emergency ordinances involving the by-elections in Sabah and Greek until today. People don't seem to be bothered. There's total silence on this point. That's a big problem. Of course, when we had our first constitution in the 60s, the position was reversed. I don't know why they changed it and then they twisted it again in the constitutional amendment, put in the ouster clause. So that is beyond challenge. That's what the judge told us in Malacca or here in Kuala Lumpur. We don't have the key. Even if we have the key, we can't open the door because of the ouster clause. Nothing to argue then. Yeah? Hence, people are using the basic structure doctrine. Yeah? You are an economist, I make one general point. You see, because economics matters a lot in politics. What we are seeing today is some disconnect between politics and economics. People don't realize that good governance is also part of development. Economic development must depend largely on good governance too. But they don't seem to care, or maybe don't even realize this clear influence between economics and politics, raw politics. Which is why everything that I've been speaking about in the book is really good governance, on integrity and all that. Why? So that we can have this development. It's not just for its own sake. So unless we change, we'll be lagging behind. Yeah, we'll be overtaken soon by Vietnam or whatever those other countries. Yeah.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Okay, so I think the time is overdue already, so we'll have our last question which is a more relaxed question. Tan Sri, this member of the floor wants to know if there is a path to speakership for people without legal background. Is there a path to speakership for people without legal background? Speakership. So, speakership, if they want to, pursue that path to become the next speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, perhaps.
I don't know whether it's good to have a legal background to be a speaker. It helps, certainly, but it is not a handicap not to have it. It's a lot of common sense and goodwill and appreciation of the rules. It's like being chairman of a meeting, yeah, of a board meeting or something. You don't need to be a lawyer to get to the nitty-gritty. You will have your advisors, legal advisors. Well, you need to have a sense of the job and understanding others. Yeah? So no. I don't think all the speakers have got legal background. Most of them have a legal background. But certainly deputy speakers don't have legal background, most of them. My deputy speaker was Rashid Harun, doesn't have a legal background. I think he's an engineer or some sort. Yeah. So people can perform without legal background.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for that insight. As we come to an end, I would just like to thank everyone here for your attention and as well as your time and effort just to be here at the Faculty of Law with us today. And thank you for those who asked questions. And if you did have any questions in mind, perhaps if you are attending the book signing session later, you can perhaps maybe ask Tan Sri your question. So before we finally bid farewell, Tan Sri, izinkan saya mengungkapkan pantun yang Tan Sri sendiri telah rangkapkan di Parlimen with a little twist, Tan Sri. Bintang kecil di langit yang tinggi berkilauan menghias angkasa. Ternyata cukuplah sampai di sini, bertemu kita di lain masa.
It's good enough to be included in the book.
Okay, thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, everyone, and with that, we conclude this event today. Thank you.